Hello, my name is Kelly Guerin, and I will be discussing the topic of the effects of climate change on ice caps and polar bears. I decided to do both ice caps and polar bears because they both kind of coincide with each other since we technically need ice caps to have polar bears. Over the past 10 years, climate change has been a huge deal and topic discussed in the science world. Scientists have been trying to educate the importance of climate change and its impacts that it has on the planet, and that if people don't change how we have been living, the earth could be destroyed and not livable one day. With that being said, polar bears are considered to be the poster child of the impacts climate change has had on the colder areas of the world. Although climate change also impacts many other aspects of the world like erosion, flooding, harm of crops and production, species loss, etc., ice caps melting is kind of the start point to all the dangerous aspects just mentioned. To start off the topic, I thought I would give some knowledge on climate change before we get into the impacts it has on my main topic that will be discussed. Over the years, climate change on Earth has affected the planet in ways that everyone can see with their own eyes. Loss of sea ice, normal morning frost, lengthy growing seasons, sea levels rising tremendously are all examples of some of the impacts climate change has had on the Earth. Scientists have said that human activity has caused the average temperatures of the Earth to rise due to greenhouse gases and more. The amount of climate change globally will continue over the next few centuries due to the gases and how sensitive Earth actually is to those harmful substances. Although we talk about how rising temperatures have caused sea levels to rise and sea ice to melt, there are various regions on the planet that are experiencing very long drought periods due to the dry temperatures affecting their crop production. Global sea levels are thought to have risen 1 to 8 feet by 2100, and Arctic oceans are seen to be ice-free in the summer before the mid-century. Although the impacts of climate change affect the entire planet, I thought I would give some impacts that it has on our area of the world. In the Northeast, there may be heavy downpours, heat waves, rising sea levels that will take place. This will affect many things like agriculture, ecosystems, and fishing, and they will become compromised as time goes on. Other areas around the United States will also be affected by those as well, but other regions might also experience drought, declining water supply, and even wildfires. Not only does climate change affect the earth, it affects the way we live. Obviously, food production is being harmed by these impacts, which makes it hard to continue production at the rate we need it to be. According to a website I found called Yale Climate Connections, climate change poses not just one big whole slew of challenges to farmers and to challenges to communities that depend on them for food. The link to the information that I have found to help me with this presentation will be presented on the slides. Now on to the topic I planned on focusing on, ice caps. Yes, they are cold and huge masses of ice, but they have their importance to this planet. Not only do species call the Arctic ice caps home, but they have many benefits to the climate of the world. Arctic sea ice keeps the polar regions cool and helps moderate global climate. Sea ice has a bright surface. 80% of the sunlight that strikes it reflects back into space. As sea ice melts in the summer, it exposes the dark ocean surface. Instead of reflecting 80% of the sunlight, the oceans absorb 90% of the sunlight. The ocean heats up and the Arctic temperatures rise further, according to the National Snow and Ice Data Center. Also, a scientific journal that I found while researching this topic titled Impact of Shrinking Arctic Ice Covering on Marine Primary Production, the ice caps continue to melt more and more over the summer months and then will freeze over a thin layer of ice during the winter months. That thin layer is trying to replace what was lost during the summer months, but does not fulfill what was lost and is easier to melt by surface heating. So yes, ice caps are very important in regulating the temperature as well as keeping the climate controlled. We lose Arctic sea ice at a rate of almost 13% per decade. And over the past 30 years, the oldest and thickest ice in the Arctic has declined by a stunning 95%, according to the World life.org. With the melting of the ice caps, not only does it mean less homes for polar bears, but it makes the sea levels rise a tremendous amount, meaning coastlines will also rise and coastal cities will be in danger. There is a possibility that the sea level could rise a total of 20 feet if things do not change. Heat waves are another potential hazard, which is going to affect food production because droughts and dry weather. Less ice also means less homes for not only polar bears, but walruses, seals, penguins, and Arctic foxes and owls, and more. Altogether, it is just ice, but it makes a great impact on the Earth and has so many resources that we might not even notice, and without them, the climate will be greatly affected. Now to continue about the cute part of this presentation, polar bears. Like many other animals and species, polar bears has been affected drastically by climate change. Since we all know polar bears belong in the cold, it is obvious that this occurring issue of rising temperatures is not a good thing for them. Polar bears are only found in the Arctic. The most important habitats for polar bears are the edge of ice packs, where currents and winds interact, forming a continually melting and refreezing matrix of ice patches and leads, which are open spaces in the sea ice. Polar bears, along with other animals that were mentioned before, use the Arctic ice as their home base for breeding, feeding, and more. That being said, less ice and cold means less polar bears and other animals that belong in the Arctic that also feed the polar bears. In a scientific journal titled Possible Effects of Climate Warming on Selected Populations of Polar Bears in the Canadian Arctic, scientists talk about by the year 2100 or possibly even sooner, polar bears in the Arctic are going to be another species extinct, which many more also may follow as well. That being said, climate change isn't the only issue for the environment, but the species that live in it as well, including us humans. Now, I know I spent a majority of the presentation talking about mostly climate change and not as much about polar bears and ice caps alone, but climate change is a real issue that has been and should have been taken seriously. The issue with the Arctic ice caps is huge, and there may not be much more we can do about it at the moment, but it doesn't hurt to try. Animals are on this earth for a reason, and once one goes extinct, others may follow. People always want to reduce, reuse, and recycle, but there needs to be more. More actions, more words, more education, more everything. Species are going extinct, ice caps are melting, and the planet is going to be not livable someday, and I know I don't want to see that happen in my future kids' lifetime, never mind my own. Educating the youth and raising money to further increase the knowledge of the science behind it could benefit the amount of years we have left on this beautiful earth. With that being said, again, my name is Kelly Guerin, and thank you for listening to me on my presentation about the effects of climate change on Arctic ice caps and polar bears.